To challenge you. Hey YouTube, I want to challenge you. Hey YouTube, I want to challenge you. Challenge you to look at the evidence, that is. See, there's a lot of misinformation being spread around that it's not reasonable to be a Christian because there's no evidence. Well, I disagree with that. I think there's very good evidence. First off, let me say I think that you're a spiritual being having a human experience. Not just a brain and a body. There's a lot more to you than a physical animal. You have infinite worth in the eyes of God. And I think this evidence is just so important for you to know that God is there and that He has provided a way for you to know Him. I believe that 2,000 years ago, God did something so huge, so unforgettable, and so supernatural that it could not be explained away by skeptics. God resurrected Jesus from the dead, and it authenticated everything that Jesus taught. And I believe that the Bible really is the Word of God, but I'm not basing my case on the inerrancy of the Bible, so we don't have to get into all of that. I'm going to use 5 minimal facts that nearly all historians and scholars that study the subject will concede to. Now, using the methods and standards of an historian, I want to use these 5 minimal facts to show that the most reasonable conclusion is that Jesus really did rise from the dead. Now, the first fact is that Jesus died on the cross. The second fact is that the disciples sincerely believed they saw the risen Jesus. The third fact is the uncharacteristic conversion of the church persecutor, Paul. The fourth fact is the uncharacteristic conversion of Jesus' skeptical brother, James. And the fifth fact is the empty tomb. The first fact is that Jesus really did die on the cross. Now, this is attested to in all 4 Gospels and 5 ancient secular sources: Josephus, Tacitus, Lucian, Mara bar Serapion, and the Jewish Talmud. Now, with this much data, even John Dominic Cris of the Jesus Seminar allows this as a historical fact. The second fact is that the disciples sincerely believed that they saw the risen Jesus. Now, this can be evidence from 9 independent sources in 3 categories. Now, the first category is Paul's testimony about the disciples. You can find that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Now, the second line of evidence is the oral traditions of the early church. Now, we have creeds that we find through Paul's letters and other parts of the book. The one in 1 Corinthians 15 verses 3 through 8 is especially important, so important that I'm releasing a whole video on just that subject. The third category of evidence is the written tradition. Now, as in the gospel accounts, the writings of the apostolic fathers, Clement and Polycarp. Furthermore, that they sincerely believed it is evidenced by their willingness to suffer and die for their story. Now, people don't die for something they know to be false. Now, the fact that the disciples were willing to die for this is attested to in 7 ancient sources: Acts, which is in the Bible; Clement of Rome, which is independent of the Bible; Polycarp, Ignatius, Dionysius of Corinth, Tertullian, and Origen. The third fact, Saul of Tarsus, a highly trained Pharisee, admits to killing and persecuting Christians. His unlikely conversion is evidenced by his personal testimony and his letters to the churches at Corinth, Galatia, and Philippi. This is powerfully enhanced by multiple attestations to Paul's willingness to suffer and die for his own belief. Now, in addition to his own word and Luke's record in Acts, his stand for the gospel is recorded by Clement of Rome, Polycarp, and Tertullian, amongst others. What would take a man who had such a high standing as a Pharisee to give his life, to be beaten, to be jailed, and then beheaded? The fourth fact concerns James, the brother of Jesus. Now, James didn't believe Jesus while he was still alive. In fact, in the Gospel of Mark, it's recorded that his family thought he was crazy with his messianic claims. Now, it's all the more interesting because we see in the Creed in 1 Corinthians 15 that James saw an appearance of Jesus, and then later Paul and Luke record that James became the leader of the Jerusalem church. So something major happened between the time he thought he was crazy and the time he became the leader of the church, because then Josephus has a record of James's martyrdom for his belief in his brother. The conversion of skeptics is not easily dismissed. Now, the fifth fact is the empty tomb. Now, it's certainly the most reasonable inference from the historical data. Now, probably the strongest argument for the empty tomb is the Jerusalem factor. Now, think about it. Christianity started in Jerusalem. The tomb of Jesus was right there at Jerusalem. Now, if the disciples were going to make up a story, does it make sense that they would make up something that was falsifiable? I mean, all the Jews would have to do is go to the tomb and produce Jesus' body, and Christianity would have been dead right there at the beginning. But no, the disciples risk a claim that can be easily disproven. They claimed they saw the physically risen Jesus. They touched him. They saw the wounds on him. Now, they wouldn't do that. They could easily just say they saw a spiritual Jesus or a ghost. They could easily make a claim like that and get away with it. But no, they said they went the whole way. They went the whole way. There's really good reasons to believe in the empty tomb. Okay, the challenge to you is to provide an alternate explanation that accounts for all 5 facts. Now, submit your video responses and let's see where the evidence leads. Now, pay attention to my channel, as I will be releasing videos that support each line of evidence. The first one, History 101, is just a brief overview of some of the general principles historians use in evaluating the evidence. I'll post a video supporting each point, and I'll do my best to respond personally to the most challenging alternate explanations. Now, I'm not going to respond to videos that are vulgar or disrespectful, so try to be polite and explain the evidence. I think in the final analysis, you'll see that the most reasonable explanation is that Jesus really did rise from the dead.